This time on Poll Hub, we're checking the pulse of the people with our America Now Index for the first quarter of 2022. Over the course of almost 2 years now that we've been doing the index, some trends have emerged. We're going to talk about them. Then, for all the partisan disagreements in Washington, there's one thing every senator who was in attendance recently agreed on. Nope, not a pay raise. No, more vacation days, not that. No, it's making daylight savings time permanent. But it turns out that may not be the best idea. We're going to peer deep into the morning darkness to explain. And finally, Lee's fun fact is also about time, sort of, the time you spend doing something very memorable. Or not. Confused? Stick around. We'll get it all sorted. Maybe. And hi, everybody. Welcome to Poll Hub. I'm JD Dapper.
And I'm Barbara Carvalho.
And I'm Lee Meringoff.
Well, it is the end of the first quarter for 2022, and that signals our check-in with Americans with our America Now National Outlook Index. The index looks at 4 areas of American life. Top of the list is the economy, but we also look at how Americans rate their health, how they think about their communities, and also how they, in general, think of American society and our government. So guys, what are Americans thinking right now?
Well, I would say one thing that jumped out, well, 2 things jumped out at me, and if I think harder, maybe 3 things. But one thing is that, an index is supposed to kind of like have many factors which either cancel each other out or take into account changes, but it's sort of a more steady consistency, and we're sure seeing that in most of our numbers. We've done, I guess, more than a dozen of these, and going back in time, I mean, a lot of the numbers look a lot like they used to. However, the one area that we do see continued volatility, surprises in the area of the economic index, where we've had a drop from on a scale of 0 to 10, 1 to 10, from 5.7 to 5.5. But the area that was most pronounced was that this is a good time to make purchases and investments. And that one fell from 5.0 to 4.3, which is an interesting drop, as did some of the others, which have to do with inflationary and purchasing power. I mean, I think that's what we're seeing here. The notion that the purchasing power, because of the inflation, is not as strong, and people are feeling that.
Just to explain the numbers for a second, people are rating each of these indicators on a scale of 0 through 10, and with 10 being the highest. And we haven't seen a lot of high scores over the time of the index. But Jay, your observations.
Yeah, so on the health index number, it's at 7.1. It's been in the ballpark for most of the time. The very beginning when we did this, the first index we did was right after the pandemic initially hit, and that number was considerably lower. But it's been steady for a long time. Community index number, largely around how people feel about where they live and whether they're having an impact, if they feel safe. High, 7.3, and has stayed that way. But the 2 that have always kind of dogged the index, if you will, have brought it down overall, are the society and government index number and the economy. We've talked a little bit about the economy. On the society and government component, is our society fair and just? Is only a 4.7. Is leadership working for people like you? 4.8. These have been low in the past. They remain low. And I think it speaks to 2 things. And that's one of the great things about the index is it underscores what we see in individual question polls. So if you ask, how do you feel about Joe Biden? How do you feel about the economy? Or are you worried about inflation? That tells you one thing. This tells you something different, but it is underscoring what we're seeing in the other numbers. So in the case of society and government, society is not just and fair, leadership not really working for people like you. That underscores the sense that people have that in other questions about the danger to our democracy and where America is failing in terms of the government and society. With the economy, same thing. This underscores that inflation is not just something people are concerned about because we're asking questions specifically about inflation, but when offered the opportunity to talk about the economy in a broader way, which is what this index does, good time to make a purchase, 4.3. Lee, you're right. I mean, that underscores that inflation makes this a bad time to make a purchase, and people are reflecting on this inflationary pressure by responding in this way in our poll.
To point out that the overall combined index at 6.4 is very close to the 6.5 we had in November.
And for 3 or 4 months before, I mean, it's been 6.5. Most of last year was 6.5.
I think it is important to point out that the lowest combined category is the economy at 5.4. And even though the society and government index has the two lowest individual indicators, as you indicated, on leadership, and that the society is fair and just, which are, that and the good time to purchase investments under the economy are the only fours in here. Those two are pulling down the society and government index overall. The other things are good. When it comes to the economy, there's not much to write home about.
Other than jobs.
Other than jobs, which again reflects what we know from individual polls, but putting this all together, as you both have indicated, is a helpful way of kind of leveling out the short-term fluctuations a little bit and getting a fundamental attitude about life and very important things like health and economy.
But Lee, what it also does, and this is what I think is so interesting here, is you're going to mention in a moment here Joe Biden's approval rating. There is a dissonance between economic data, some economic data, which is very good, the inflation, which is not good, but the overall mood of the country, which is so down, yet things are so much better than they were 2 years ago, objectively so much better in so many ways.
You mean in terms of other economic indicators?
I mean, in terms of health, in terms of the pandemic, in terms of, you go down the line, objectively, statistically, we're in much better shape than we were 2 years ago. Yet the mood of the country is worse, and I think that's picked up in here as well, is what's driving the mood down is what we pick up over this long term. And what's driving the mood down is the economy, and then the sense that nothing's really gotten any better in terms of Washington, and how Washington works, and how the parties work, and how our politics works.
Going to jump to how this plays out for the president, because I think all of this is interconnected.
Yeah, and his approval rating, which we had, interestingly, after his State of the Union, and when he was making some very strong speeches about the early days of Ukraine, and we had a bounce up to as high as 47%, which is, in this day and age, something to write home about, because we don't see 50s anymore, so a high 40 is decent. But what's happened to Joe Biden is that bounce post State of the Union and for his leadership is going down to 39%, with 54% disapproving. This is the very, very close to, actually it's the same number he had in February before this alleged bounce. And this is a number that puts him in Trump land when Trump's numbers were lagging. So if you hear about Democrats being nervous about the upcoming midterm elections and our politics being nationalized, that the president's approval rating is low is reflecting a lot about the economy and not about his leadership in Ukraine, which isn't front and center on people's minds. And to your point, Jay, and I think this is interesting, we may be also sort of in what they call them the long haulers. Well, this may be a long haul in public opinion, because the pandemic was so long and so disruptive and very attitudinal forming. I'm not so sure this gloominess that people feel would have been as long lasting had not there been for COVID. Life has been hard, and people are just beginning to feel that maybe we're turning the corner.
One thing that has brought a lot of hope to people is that the idea that daylight savings time could become permanent. Because when we ask people, and many pollsters have, if you like daylight savings time or if you want to keep it, people always say yes. Well, almost always. In 1974, daylight savings time was made permanent. And the polls were great when Congress decided to do that. And 3 months later, the polls were terrible once people actually experienced it. So what are we talking about? The Senate unanimously, all the senators who were present, unanimously passed a bill to make daylight savings time permanent. Now, it hasn't happened yet. It's got to go through the House, and then Biden would have to sign it. But it's, unanimous. Senate never happens. But it happened. But as we've looked at it, while it's popular, there is some data around this to suggest that it might not be the best idea.
Well, first of all, I know there's always a big debate about whether it's daylight saving time or daylight saving time. And so I think probably the Webster's dictionary should probably put in both uses, just as I believe they're including you and use, or at least contemplating adding the plural to you. Because that is how most of us refer to it, with an S. But I think its original intent was daylight saving time. But I don't know. I'm depending here on our buddy Harry Enton, who did a piece on this a while back. And did the research. But I agree with you, Jay, and I will continue to also talk about it as daylight savings time. I think the impetus is that
that was almost a backhanded compliment. I'm not sure whether that was a criticism or a compliment. It sort of had a little bit of both.
Oh, it didn't. It wasn't either or. I think it's very real. I mean, most of us do refer to it as daylight savings time, and it doesn't. Even if it's if it's plural or if it's possessive, it just, the S feels very comfortable there. So for those though who are sticklers and we and much more traditional, I just wanted to acknowledge those folks is all.
She's trying to head off the social media response to this at the past. So people, hold your fire, okay?
So sure. So daylight saving time comes at a time when at least us folks here in the Northeast are coming out of, in the Midwest and the Northwest are coming out of a pretty, usually a pretty significant weather, not a lot of daylight. There has been, a correlation by those who have looked at this statistically, that the darkness at different times of the day adds to, or the lack of light during the day adds to seasonal depression. It adds to auto accidents because people are traveling during times that are darker during commutes. So there has always been this kind of a sense of, well, maybe we should just have this year round and just change the clocks, period. Now, I don't know what this means for the states that don't even recognize daylight saving time, but I don't know if any of you guys have looked into that. But it is not that simple. So, Lee, I don't know if you want to weigh in on some of the issues. You're shaking your head.
Well, I was going to come slightly different, but why don't you continue along the line you're talking, and I got something else to say on this.
Well, let me give a couple numbers real quick. There's two polls that have come out in the last few weeks. Monmouth, our friends at Monmouth did one that showed 35% of Americans want to continue the practice of resetting clocks twice a year. So only about a third think, yeah, let's keep resetting. YouGov asked a question about, do you want daylight savings time to be made permanent? And that was 59%. So about 60% said, yeah, make daylight savings time permanent. The thing we're getting at here, though, is that some experts have looked at this and said, if you want to keep one, which isn't a bad idea necessarily, don't keep daylight savings time, keep standard time. Because daylight savings time, if you keep it, means that in some parts of the country, in a lot of parts of the country, because of where they are in a time zone, it's not about north and south, it's actually about east and west in a time zone. The further west you are in a time zone, sunrise could be at 8:15 or 8:30 in the morning. And that is indeed what happened when daylight savings time was made permanent in 1974. Is there was a poll that showed, a NORC poll from University of Chicago, 79% of Americans approved making daylight saving or savings time permanent. 3 months later, only 42% approved. And that was after a long, very dark winter in a lot of parts of the country.
The notion that you had the entire Senate going in this direction is fascinating, even if they were misguided. Probably not so fascinating.
Well, hang on a second. Science isn't exactly their forte. So,
so I've heard.
So I'm not really sure that they were necessarily looking at all the research, because what I was also going to note is, as you pointed out, Jay, it's not so much the hour that we end up having, it's the switch that seems to also be the most difficult. And so when we look at those issues, certainly seasonal depression is something that's very real and is a problem, regardless of which time you're actually setting it to, because one emphasizes the evening, one emphasizes the morning, but there's still the same number of daylight hours in the day. So what people really struggle with around this time change is the time change itself. And it takes a while to adjust. It seems like it might be simple to just that an hour wouldn't be a big deal, but it is. And I know I've seen, and we had this discussion in our office, people have suggested that instead of doing this in the middle of the night on a weekend, perhaps we should change it on a Monday.
It takes so long for your body to adjust.
Or a Friday. If you do it at the end of the day Friday, you get to go home an hour early. Except then we pointed out, oh wait, but then you have to stay an hour late.
And then you have to make sure you change all your clocks. I mean, there's some downsides to this. You have to change all your clocks, except the ones that change automatically. I don't know if they'll still change automatically, maybe not.
You have clocks? You have manual clocks still?
All those kinds of things. Yeah. But here's the question I have. My problem with time, I don't think gets addressed by this at all. And that's I have a time zone mental block. And I can't compute, like, if I have friends in Dallas and I know he's on a different time, this isn't going to help me with that, whether they change it or not, right?
It's an hour earlier.
Well, also Texas does recognize daylight saving time, so it's okay. I mean, I thought you were going to go perhaps more globally, where some countries do change the hour and others don't, or we often change it in at different times of the year. So it can cause confusion globally, but set the clock, Lee, and set it for where you're going to connect.
Let's go around the horn real quickly before you go to fun fact. Would you rather have more light in the morning or more light in the evening?
I'd like more light in the evening. Yeah.
I like more light.
But you can't have more light.
But I want more light.
You can move to Florida. Don't.
I do look forward to daylight saving time when we're coming out of the winter. There's absolutely no question about that, because we do have more light in the afternoon. So I do appreciate it, but it's really hard starting to get up in the dark again.
I like more in the afternoon too. I like that. I don't care about the mornings. So there you go. Okay, Lee.
Okay, well, here's the other thing. You were talking about savings time and saving time. There's another word that doesn't have an S that everybody thinks does, and it's something you eat at the ballpark, and it's a refreshment. Barb, go for
I
that.
don't think that was. Is that supposed to be your fun fact, Lee? That Cracker Jack or not Cracker Jack?
That's Cracker Jack is the actual word, and most people say Cracker Jacks. So there you go. There's lessons in this podcast for everybody. All right.
Good luck with the segue now.
Okay. Well, this segue, people start using those S's appropriately, but only in my dreams. Okay. Now we got the segue.
I thought you were dreaming of baseball.
Oh, that's even better, because that's true.
And World Series even.
All right. What's the fun fact?
So CBS News, October of 2021, made available to us by our friends at the Roper Center Archives at Cornell University. And they asked at CBS just a couple of years ago, how often do you remember the dreams you have while sleeping? Almost always, most of the time, only sometimes, rarely or never. The almost always was 11, most of the time 21, sometimes 34. That was the highest single response, and rarely at 24 and never at 10. So you have roughly a third saying almost always or most of the time, a third saying sometimes, and another third saying rarely or not at all. Guys, I'm not a big sleeper, so I'm happy to have a dream or not a dream. I'll go either way on this. And my dreams tend to be negative when I have them. I don't have, ticker tape parades in my dreams. I have things like going back to graduate school, and I can't remember whether I still have my dissertation done or I handed in that term paper. Scarred for life from the educational process. And so I'm very sensitive to that teaching. I may have a bigger impact on some of my students than I think is probably reasonable. But anyway, what do you guys think about all this?
Well, I kind of had trouble with the question itself, because if you, how do you know you're not remembering them? Maybe you're just not dreaming.
Good.
Or if you are remembering them, how do you know? No, but even if you remember them, how do you know that you remembered them all, or that you didn't not remember others?
Don't we know that the dreams you remember are the ones that happen very close to when you wake up?
Exactly. I think that's what research shows. Right. I just generally tend to remember nightmares. I think because I then wake up.
I only remember stress dreams. I know people who can do what's called waking dreaming or vivid dreaming, whatever it's called, where they can actually direct their dreams. And that's not a made up thing. People can actually do that. But yeah, I remember stress dreams. I have not been a TV reporter in 13 years. And last night I had a dream that I wasn't going to make my slot for my piece. So it's like you, Lee, scarred for life. You know, I'm not going to make my time. I'm on at 6. The 6 o'clock show starts at 6 o'clock and my piece isn't ready. Oh my God. How's this possible?
You always cut it close, Jay, and therefore you deserve to be
suffering.
You have to imagine all those producers over the years who were saying, "Is Jay going to make his slot here?"
Yeah, they had nightmares too, and I guess this is payback. That's what it is. Yeah.
So anyway, but they say dreaming is Mary Griffith, former producer at Channel 4, is nodding right now. But they say dreaming is therapeutic. It's good to get rid of the stresses that you have during the day. So there is something to be said, I guess, whether you're remembering it or not, that sleeping is a good thing. Recommended highly for health and long life.
That'll do it for this edition of Poll Hub.
Poll Hub is a production of the Marist Poll at Marist College in Poughkeepsie, New York.
Mary Griffith is our executive producer.
Casey Schaff is our production supervisor.
The Poll Hub team includes Ashley Marcinek, Athen Hollis, and Emily Fry.
If you enjoy Poll Hub, please consider leaving a review.
Positive reviews help other listeners like you find us.
If you'd like to learn more about polling and survey science, check out the Marist Poll Academy, our free online learning portal.
If you have questions for us, tweet them directly to @MaristPoll.
Remember, you can always tell your smart speaker to play Poll Hub, and with any luck, it will cooperate.
Finally, wherever you listen to Poll Hub, there is a subscribe button.
Click it, and the latest episode will be ready for you in your podcasting app as soon as we release it.
We'll see you next time.